Dr. Troy Flanagan is the Vice President of Performance at the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA. It's with a unique background in sports technology development that includes a PhD in Aerospace Engineering. Having spent over 20 years directing the sports science and medicine programs across the world, he has overseen the preparation of Australian Olympic athletes, facilitated the programs that saw the US Olympic ski and snowboard team more than double their medal tally from the previous Olympics. Troy was brought on at the Milwaukee Bucks at the end of the 2015-2016 season, and over the last decade has built a world-class high-performance program that has seen the Bucks go from being an almost forgotten brand in their own city to one of the best performing teams in the NBA. Dr. Troy Flanagan, it's a great pleasure to catch up with you. I've heard so much about you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Luke. Appreciate it.
Can I start with the Milwaukee Bucks? Since 2016, over that time, the Bucks have pulled off one of the most remarkable transformations in sports history, really. The team's reshaped their image and their brand locally, nationally, and globally. Can you tell us about that experience and how does it feel to be part of a program that's been so successful?
I remember the first meeting I had with the ownership, and they said, wouldn't it be crazy if the Milwaukee Bucks won the NBA championships? And I lived on the other side of the country in Utah, and I'd never really heard of the Milwaukee Bucks. You know, they've been a bottom dweller in the NBA for, the 10 years prior, down the bottom of the league. And it's pretty extraordinary to go through the journey from the bottom to the top. And that's actually, as a professional, what I enjoy the most.
And your remit covers such a wide range, isn't it? Sports medicine, wearable technology, software development, performance analytics, diet, psychology, basically everything to do with the welfare of the players at the Bucks is in your portfolio. Is there something that jumps out to you, Troy, that you feel like, God, that's an area that's really been important to us in the organisation's success?
Yeah, I think you do have to be a jack of all trades to do my job. It took me about 20 years to get ready, and I was only just ready to take on this role after about 20 years in the industry. And I think the thing that was really the key to I don't know if it's any discipline that I've really overseen, but it was the coordinated strategic vision of the owners, and then for us to, I guess, imagine what the Milwaukee Bucks looks like in the future. And then it was a simple to-do list after that. But to identify what's holding a team back and what's limiting the preparation and performance of the team, I think that's really the true mastery of taking a team from the bottom to the top. And the US Olympic team actually taught me how to do that when I went to work for them. They are masterful strategic planners. And I think that was one of the keys to success.
Troy, I heard you just mention imagining what the Milwaukee Bucks would look like into the future, and it sounds like trying to fast track that. My mind immediately goes to Australian Hall of Fame legend John Bertrand and his always looking 10 years ahead. What was the Australia 2 going to look like in 10 years' time, and trying to get there quicker than everyone else? Is that sort of thinking a bit of what you were just describing?
Absolutely, exactly what I was describing. So my background in aerospace engineering, it's funny you mentioned Australia 2, because that was one of the projects when I was younger that really inspired me to do the work that I do, designing kind of secret weapons. And that was one of the first secret weapons in sport, really, wasn't it? That people came out and their minds were blown that we could develop that sort of technology and really radically transform the sport. And since then, I've actually had a pattern of designing secret weapons, whether it's being part of the bike design program at RMIT University with the aerospace guys there, developing pretty much the first wearable technology to track soccer players on the field 24 years ago. And now that stuff's everywhere. And the US Olympic team is the best place in the world to go to design, particularly skiing and snowboarding, because so much technology there, and designing ski jumping suits that were designed in Melbourne at RMIT and for the US Olympic team. And, those sorts of tech projects is something that's always driven. And I guess what I'm getting here, the aerospace engineers taught me how to think like that. So what aerospace guys do, they stand in the future and imagine what the future looks like. And and the question they ask is, what is stopping that future from actually happening right now? and they identify key technology barriers, or even in the NBA, it could be, culture barriers or those sorts of things. And then they work on those barriers. And once they solve those barriers, rapid progression, rapid evolution of the sport happens overnight.
What I love about that thinking, Troy, is that you can literally apply that to anything in life, can't you? To business, to education, to any discipline, isn't it? Wanting to pursue change at a rapid rate and try and stand, as you said, in the future. Have you seen that in other areas of your life where that pursuit of excellence and trying to bring it forward works for you in other areas?
That's a good question. I think I applied that thinking to everything. In working with how do my staff interact with coaches? I watch coaches and what they do every day, and like they're spending a lot of time, doing these very inefficient processes. And could we imagine the way that they do things in the future, and automating things so that they get their time back? So I guess I just try and apply it everywhere.
Do you know what I love? There's a very specific example that will not resonate in an audio medium, but we asked Troy to adjust his camera, and I'd sat here and was trying to shift my laptop around. You put up your hand, and AI moved your camera, and my mind was blown before we even started this interview. So I get the feeling you live and breathe what you talk about every moment. You've had a once in a generation, maybe a once in a lifetime athlete, Giannis Antetokounmpo, in your organisation, the Milwaukee Bucks. And for those that don't know the story, as an immigrant to Greece and growing up with abject poverty to become an NBA superstar and someone that everyone has marvelled at. For you to be around an athlete like that, what's it take to manage someone like that on a daily basis, Troy?
Well, it's changed over time. When I first walked in, he'd been at the Bucks for a year, and he's a big, tall, skinny guy with not many muscles and wasn't very strong. And then I hired one of the best strength coaches in the world, and Suki Hobson, to come in and build his physique and also his athleticism. And he said at one point, I'd love to be make the All-Star team, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty ambitious for someone who's pretty early in their career. And boom, he did it. And then I'd like to be MVP, and he did it. And I'd like to do it again, he did it. I'd like to win a championship, he did it. And slowly but surely, all of the things that come with that increase in performance, but also increase in fame, and the demands that pull on him. I've just seen it rapidly change over time to where now I've traveled with him, to New York City, and just to see him, and also overseas, and just to see people recognize him and be inspired by him. Kids know him and love him, and he's a pretty special athlete that it's a privilege to even know.
And he looks like a remarkable human being as well, Troy. There's a great documentary that's been released recently on Giannis, and I'm sure it only scratches the surface. But the story that springs to mind on when he first came out and literally sending every dollar he had back to the family. And he would go to the teller every time he got money and literally feed it back to the family. And so much so that he got caught out pre-game sending money back home, the story was told, and realised then that he was going to miss the game because he literally couldn't catch a taxi to the ground, and hailed down a Milwaukee supporter who was driving to the game, who dropped him sort of 10 Ks out. He ran the last sort of 6 or 7 miles to the game. Is the legend of that story true?
Yes, it is. And it doesn't surprise me that he's very, very resourceful. And I could see that absolutely happening. I just heard about it afterwards. I would have been horrified if I had been standing at a game and the guy just ran a 10K before they started. But we heard about it later, and that doesn't surprise me. But yeah, incredible guy, and so driven, so professional, and he's genetically gifted for sure. But it's the hard work and determination, and like he'll work on himself all day, all night, into the wee hours of the morning. He's just constantly working on getting better every single day. So for me, it's not a shock or a surprise that he's achieved the heights he has because of how much work and how much further he's willing to go beyond what any other player in the league is doing. And that's probably a product of his story.
Troy, you grew up in a small Australian country town. It's a long way to the US Olympic team and working at the cutting edge of aerospace engineering and elite performance and NBA championship winning teams. Do you look back at your upbringing, your background, and think, wow, that's the possibilities endless, isn't it? And it's inspiring to young people listening to this. Can you tell us a bit about that journey?
Yeah, I did grow up in a small town in country New South Wales called Balranald, which if you drive from Sydney to Adelaide, you actually drive through it. Don't blink, you'll miss it. It's pretty small, but I was a swimmer when I was a kid, and I remember my mum and dad got a colour TV and they turned it on. The opening ceremony of the Moscow Olympics was on, and I was just blown away by it, and thought one day I'll go to the Olympics. And wasn't a good enough swimmer to go, obviously, but it turns out I was a better sports scientist and high performance specialist, and I've been to several Olympics now with the Australian and US teams, and I finally got there. And I think I was always really driven. I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I was 16 years old, and pretty much this is it. I didn't expect to be in America though, and I didn't expect to be at an NBA basketball team. So that's been kind of the surprise. You just work hard and an opportunity will present itself, and that often takes you on a tangent sideways.
I wanted to ask you about the difference between US and Australian culture. The great Greg Norman, legendary Australian golfer and championship winning world number one, had a saying that in America, if you buy a nice car, someone's likely to come up and say, "Hey, Troy, nice car." In Australia, someone's likely to run the keys down the side of it, and we call it tall poppy syndrome in Australia. It seems a uniquely bad Australian thing. What do you make of that tall poppy syndrome?
It's definitely something that I've experienced personally, on my journey, going through my career in the Australian system. And you get to the US, and the attitude is very much can do. It's a culture of possibility. It's probably why I enjoy working here so much, is because we have billionaire owners who have the exact same mindset that anything is possible. The Milwaukee Bucks can win the NBA championship and potentially win it a couple of times. That's the culture I really thrive in, and I love that about Americans. It's a can-do attitude. If you want to be a billionaire, everyone says go for it. Whereas in other cultures, you might get, oh, come on, man, be realistic, but over here they just go for it, and it's a can-do culture.
Troy, I've heard about your What Sucks meetings. Can you talk us through what they are and how that idea started?
So I always think that the group's more powerful than the individual, right? So we do a thing here. It's part of our planning process to debrief after the season, and we get the whole group, all my staff in, and they're actually, these meetings are a bit depressing because it seems like everything sucks, but everybody throws up things that annoy them, things that are inefficient, things that they need to change or develop. And we put it up, and then we prioritize it from high impact, if we're able to solve those things, to lower impact, and then which ones are easier to do and which ones are harder to do. And so the high impact, easy to do, they're a no-brainer. You do them. I find that it's the high impact, hard to do quadrant that is really, really where the gold is. And if you can just solve one or two of those things, you can potentially transform the way NBA players are prepared or the way they perform. And so we're really big on prioritizing those things.
Yeah, and a follow on from that, I understand that you've talked about good strategic planning. He's aiming for sort of 10 impactful strategies in a relatively short period of time, maybe 1 to 3 years, that you really go after. And does that come out of that particular forum that you just talked about? And can you elaborate on how you go about implementing those things?
Yeah, it's a really simple process for me in strategic planning. It's almost oversimplified as where are we now, where do we need to be, and how do we get there? They're kind of the three. If you look at my strategic plan, you would see those sorts of things. And we do international comparisons of all different areas, and gap analysis and things like that go into the planning process. But out of it normally comes 10 to 12 key problems that we're going to fix. And I present those to ownership, and it actually builds a lot of confidence and a lot of trust that they say, if we solve these 10 things, we will radically transform our performance. We'll go from here to here. And the owners, and the GM and everybody says, well, now I know what you're working on. Off you go. We'll give you whatever you need to do that. And I think it's really got to boil down to more of a problem-solving approach rather than just doing everything slightly better. So my strategic planning process is more about identifying, what's holding us back.
And Troy, we've been really privileged to cross over with you in the Elite Connect world that we're really passionate about, curating groups of 5 to 6 different thinkers and leaders from different backgrounds around the globe. And to have you in that, I know the group that you're with have benefited greatly from it. Tyson Ballard's a unique serial entrepreneur. Hugh Van Cuylenberg with the Resilience Project. Amit Baines at the Bulldogs are a few of the members of your group. Vanessa Ford as well is an incredible thinker. Can you tell us about that experience and what it's meant for you?
Yeah, I've really loved it. I think I've probably had some of the most radical changes out of that leadership group. It really, listening to people like Vanessa Ford and actually the whole group really, and just how much that the significance of their work and how much it's really about helping others and the communities and giving back. And it made me think, well, what am I doing? I'm kind of making rich people play NBA basketball slightly better, right? And so what else could I be doing? And a funny story that spun out is of that project is I've got to give back to the community. So I approached our owner, and within a few weeks we'd raised $5 million to try and solve obesity in the underprivileged community in Milwaukee, and we've enrolled 100 people in that program. We've set up a clinic and a barbershop in downtown Milwaukee, and those people that can't really afford the medications and the medical infrastructure that others can, and they're already halfway through the program and having extraordinary results. And we hope to grow it to 1,000 and then take it nationally. So that's one spark that leadership course has caused. And I've got to give back a little bit more. These guys are doing extraordinary things around the planet, and what am I doing to contribute and leave the world as a better place? The other thing I think that I really love about the Leader program was that we started out giving ourselves leadership and business tips and tricks, and the place that we've now ended up 12 months later is we're all successful, we're all really good within our workspace, but are we equally as successful outside of our workplace, at home, within our family and friends infrastructure? And we talk about that a lot, about the wins outside of work as much as we do about what we achieve inside our four walls in our businesses.
Troy, I love that story, and we talk about these inspiring connections in a world of collaboration. I love that an artist based in Portugal of Jamaican heritage who's transforming the way that black people are seen on screens, with Super Sema influencing an aerospace engineer growing up in rural New South Wales at a high-performing NBA team and having an impact on the obesity in a city like Milwaukee. I love the fact that someone like you is so capable of implementing and being inspired, and that you pick up things and you act on them, from what I understand, Troy, and you immediately, the gap between you thinking about something and doing something positive. Has there been other techniques that you've been able to grab and implement into your world as well?
I think the other thing that really stood out early on in the program was how much the other participants in my group cared about the individuals they work for and that they serve in their workplace. And it really has made me stop and think about, look, the NBA is 24/7 about 360 days of the year, and it's so easy to get caught up in the machine and the grind of the daily work and all of the demands that job pulls on you, and you forget to sit your guys down and say, "How are you doing?" And we play every second, third day. We travel. A day might start at quite often in the season at 8 o'clock in the morning and finish at 2 a.m. that night. And it's taxing on the staff. It's taxing on their families, and just connecting with them was something that I was reminded to do and to prioritize that, and that really had a profound impact on my connection with my staff. And we're all in this together. We're on a journey together. We're trying to win another NBA championship, but just to make sure and check in that they're okay on that journey is really important.
And Troy, we love that you've been able to share that with the 7 or so senior leaders at Milwaukee, and you can see the environment that you're in is just high performing. Where do we improve? How do we do that? And each of those individuals taking their learning to unique places to bring that back to the organisation in unique ways, which we've been incredibly privileged and fascinated by how you guys think and work. And we use this term a lot, Troy, that success leaves clues. And I love the opportunity to sit down and talk to someone like you with your experience. And we see leadership has these common traits. I want to ask you about a few of them. And we think the idea of self-leadership is where it starts for us. It's very hard for anyone to have an impact on someone else without a strong sense of their own self-leadership. What does that mean to you?
I had a career early days in my 20s where I was just working crazy hours at the Victorian Institute of Sport and in the institute system, and was really burning myself out. So by the time I was 30, I was even considering going off in a different career. And what I realized at that point was my career to that point was all about my achievements and what I could do and what I could achieve, like, working with Olympic athletes, done it, working with Olympic champions, done it. How about I get a PhD in aerospace engineering, done it. And, by the time I was 30, I was exhausted. And there was a moment where I realized that my career is not about me, it's about what I can do for others. And so I took on the possibility of being a brave and inspiring leader to everybody around me. And bravery because I needed it in that tall poppy syndrome, just to keep a culture and just to keep charging, keep achieving, keep aiming high, but also inspiring, like just back to the wing keel of Australia too. That was an inspirational moment, and it's easy to be a leader when you're an inspiring. And so that's been my mantra, and I write it down once a week on top of my to-do list of being a brave and inspiring leader. And some weeks I'm not a brave and inspiring leader, but that's what I attest to try and be. And at that moment, and when I was around 30, I started to coach. I said, okay, I'm in a good spot now. I've got all these staff below me. I'm going to coach them one day a week. I'm going to sit between 30 and 45 minutes every week and coach them on how they're doing, what their next job is, how we can get them there, what their dreams are, and really taught myself on how to coach and mentor staff. And at that point, there's a sharp inflection upwards in my career of where that realization that giving back and being an inspiring leader to others really was the key to success in my career. And like the secret of it all is the product. I was working on, almost getting staff to go on to another job, but their productivity went up 10x, and everybody's walking around with a spring in their step. And suddenly we were producing extraordinary technology, extraordinary techniques with the Olympic athletes, and we were starting to really turn heads. That was the key, is to really focus on everyone around you.
It's a great story, Troy, and I really appreciate you sharing, isn't it? And to get that knowledge at 30 years of age and have that self-reflection on yourself is a great credit to you, isn't it? That we all probably start there, and probably in sport, how do I get to the level I need to get to? That's probably a natural thing, isn't it? You want to achieve and you want success as a kid, and then to understand that the highest form of living, isn't it, is supporting someone else to get there. And as you said, when you do that, it actually enhances everyone, doesn't it? People, you 10x people's performance, even if they are going to leave your organization or leave the team that you're in. It's a great way to think, and you sum that up in such a brilliant way. It probably leads to the next dimension pretty clearly. That idea of having a positive impact on people every day in the environment you're in is something that we see as a key dimension of leadership. And that was a great story about that, isn't it? Starting to focus on being an inspiring. I love that you write that at the top of your diary every week. How have you gone about that positive impact on people daily?
Yeah, it's the NBA ecosystem does everything to stop that, given the demands of the job, and you've really got to pull yourself back to that human side on a daily basis, not just working a to-do list and charging through your day. I don't know if I have a terrific technique on what I do daily, but it's definitely a weekly reflection, and having the open door policy and just caring about people that are coming through my door.
And Troy, we got an insight into your strategic planning and the excellence that you bring to the organisation that you're in, or every organisation that you're in. And I suppose there's been some pretty clear visions that you've had for high performance. How have you gone about sharing that vision, creating and sharing that vision within the places that you've operated?
I always found myself to be a bit of a dreamer of the future. It's kind of the theme, right? And I remember the US ski team, I used to present my annual strategic plan, but the first 2 minutes of it was an inspirational video that had a message that I really wanted the leadership of the US ski team, US Olympic team, to look, the lens that I wanted them to look through, and then listen to my presentation. And so it's just opening up their minds and letting them see something inspirational. We went to the Vancouver Olympics and doubled our best ever medal tally. From Torino, which was a disaster for the US ski and snowboard team as far as medal count, and then they turned up in Vancouver in 2010 after me being there 3 years. And I'm not saying I was the reason for it, but we got them organised, systematic, and they just seemed to win everything in Vancouver. And my first message after those Olympics in my next strategic plan is, we've dominated the Olympics. What if we could do it again? What if we could take them up a notch? And then the next Olympics, we tripled our best ever medal tally. So I think it's really coming from a perspective of creating a vision and inspiring people to do that. And then once you start to achieve those things, it becomes easy. Like, well, what else have you got? What else do we need to do? It's easier to get funding. They trust, these $1 million technology projects that I would take on. They trust that, the last one worked, let's go again. What can we do with the Alpine suits? Can we make them more aerodynamic? Can we do more wind tunnel testing? Can we get some more, experts from around the world to look over our shoulder? Those sorts of things. So the snowball starts then, but it does create. It's in my mind, my strategy is to just give them that lens and then show them the future.
Troy, we see a lot of people who have success like you and consistently are really curious people. And through that curiosity, that's how they approach their learning and development. Does curiosity ring true for you?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. I'm in one of those jobs where you need to, if I was in business, if our department was a business, we would be incredibly successful because we all need PhDs to work with elite athletes. We need to do 20, 30 years of preparation in order to get ready just for this role. I've researched in anywhere from nutrition and aerospace industry to the medical side. So like the amount of preparation that we have to do just to work with an athlete these days is really like no other industry. You've got a postgraduate degree and you go, and in most other injuries, in most other industries. So I think that sort of level of preparation lends itself to having an extraordinary foundation of science underneath you that backs you, and that curiosity to learn and to innovate causes extraordinary results on the other end.
Communicating with clarity is a dimension that we see consistently around different leagues. How have you gone about that communication strategy?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm the guy who interprets all the technical jargon and gives it to the general manager and the owner. And so I take complex medical jargon about a particular injury, and I walk upstairs and say, okay, here's what's going on with his knees. Don't. Actually, the US ski team taught me this. In any situation, you need 3 talking points. And as simple as that sounds, like we would have an incident or a new sponsorship or an athlete that's achieved good results or perhaps underachieved, and they always used to meet as a group, collective group, and say, okay, this has happened, these are our talking points, everyone on that message. You can say other things, but I want you to hit these 3 target points. If anyone from the media, if anyone from the organization, we're all sticking to these 3 talking points. And I've really taken that forward if something's happening here with the Bucks, I always get the group in and say, okay, this has happened. We've got a significant injury. Here are our talking points if anyone asks, because people will come and ask for information from all different angles, and that's served me in good stead.
And you're talking the highest pressure situations. You go back to an NBA championship playoff, and one of the most high profile athletes in the world has a knee injury. Every person in your city wants to know about that knee injury and what are you doing, Troy? How do we get Giannis back on the court? So again, is it just, here's the 3 things that we're working on. Let's stick to that communication. Does that work under that extreme pressure as well?
It really does. And one of the things that I look back on in my time in Australia is the best medical professionals like Peter Harcourt and all those guys, they're always so calm under pressure. Like just all sorts of stuff would be happening, and they were just absolutely calm. Like surgeons, when things are going wrong, and they're just so cool and calm. And that's what I try and. If you actually see me in a game, like behind the bench, the whole crowd is roaring, and I'm just sitting there calmly. Not so much inside, but but I've developed that skill over 10 years of, in everything that's happening, in the gut wrenching stress of winning an NBA championship, it's kind of at the end of COVID, which adds a whole nother layer of stress. It's taught me to be calm in really chaotic situations. And I think that married with clear communication has been one of the keys to success. And even when we've got Doc Rivers now and his assistant coaches, and they're like, we can't believe how calm you are in a injury crisis. And I've had a lot of them, so maybe it just washes off these days. But that's something that has taken years to develop. I thought I had it after a couple of years, but it would still get to me. The stress would still get to me, and then after about 5 years in the NBA, I'm like, it's washing over now. I don't feel it anymore. And now after 10 years, it's I think I've got it mastered.
I love you described that's a skill you went after and worked on, and a mastery of wanting to be that way. How important has collaboration been for you?
Yeah, I think it's really the key to success. I think if I talk just NBA, I think in the past in the NBA, the medical staff and performance staff are over in that corner, and coaches are over in that corner, and that's coaching and that's medicine. And I think the really progressive world-class teams now are inviting the performance and medical staff into coaches' meetings. They're, to listen, to hear what the coaches are saying directly about the players, and taking that information back into their preparation. I think really the key to our success, or one of the keys to our success, has been the inviting nature of the different groups in the organization. And it's taught me a lot of how important it is when we've been successful, and when we haven't, it's been off a little. And so we're always striving to, form those partnerships. And the GM and the coach and I, we always say it's a partnership. We work in a partnership, and we say that word a lot. We're partners in this, and that I think that sets the tone.
Who's been the greatest leader in your life?
The greatest leader in my life, I think it's been a culmination of a lot of people. I think when I was in Australia, I really loved working for Dr. Frank Pike. I think he was the head of the VIS, and actually the first sports scientist that ever fixed Dennis Lilly's back in the days, like he's a phys editor, and pioneered the whole industry. And yeah, he's probably the guy who gave me my first start. And I would say Frank would be probably my favorite leader of who, and Peter Spencer, the two that gave me my start and saw my vision and my hunger to go off into this career. So
You reference a famous story, isn't it? One of the all-time great Australian athletes whose back was gone and rebuilt his bowling technique, the great Dennis Lilly. And then I understand he passed it on to a generation of bowlers who just consist. It's the most unnatural thing in the world to do, to bowl a cricket ball, isn't it? 160 kilometres an hour and on a piece of concrete, effectively running in at full speed. And I think he influenced a huge amount of athletes after that with great success as well. So I love that chain of it being passed on. You sitting there now in the US and passing your knowledge on to a range of athletes and changing their life. We're a bit obsessed in the elite world with this idea of collaboration and what it looks like. I mean, you've had access to incredible collaborators to try and take high-performing Olympic teams and NBA teams to their very best. Has there been one person from any of your passions, because you've done, as you said, different things with wearable technology and bikes, or anyone you thought, God, that's someone I'd love to tap into their knowledge and collaborate with? Is there a name that springs to mind?
there's lots of names that spring into my mind, which is why I'm not. I think the All Blacks are a group that I'd love to collaborate with, and I haven't at this point. My wife's a Kiwi, so she would enjoy that. But we just don't talk about rugby at home, and everything's great. But they seem to be an organisation that's been big on cultural change, innovation in the performance world, and one of the most successful teams in the world, and they've written books and all that sort of thing. But I'd like to learn what's not in the book as well, because I've learned over the past is that you can say a lot without saying anything. There's some secret sauce that they don't let out, and that's definitely what happens here at the NBA. But I'd love to work with those guys.
Yeah, it's a brilliant answer, isn't it? A team that's had that sustained success, and it's more than a religion in New Zealand, isn't it? The All Blacks are part of the DNA of that whole country, and it takes over every part of everyone who lives in that part of the world. And I'm sure that would be a fascinating collaboration. Dr. Troy Flanagan, it's been a great privilege to spend some time with you. Fascinated by the work that you're doing and how you implement all of the great successes in the spaces you've been in. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.